Australia. Ferrari have won once again. Michael Schumacher wins the 2002 Australian Grand Prix.
He's odds on for world title number 6. He's won here for the last 3 years. He starts on pole. Can anyone put the brakes on Mr. Invincible? Once a year, Albert Park, Melbourne is transformed from a public highway into a Grand Prix circuit. It's curtain up for F1 2003. Hello there, welcome to Melbourne on race day. Very well done for getting up or staying up to join us. Believe me, you are the big winners. There's nothing like watching the action live. Now, ever since we arrived in Melbourne, we've been getting to grips with the new regulations. Our reporters, Ted Kravitz and Louise Goodman, have all the details and the first reactions.
As you would expect, the revised regulations have been the talking point here in the Melbourne paddock. From a viewer's perspective, the biggest change is to the qualifying format. The drivers now have just one shot at getting it right in each session. On Friday, the championship leader heads out first. The finishing order is then reversed, so the slowest man hits the track at the start of Saturday's qualifying. The new format's proved quite popular with the drivers.
I like it. I think it's a good experience, a new experience anyway. I mean, you have just one chance. You go out there and you're going to try. Friday, you don't have much of. You have the challenge for sure because you want to beat everyone, but you don't have much of if you're first or last. It's just depending on the position of the next day. But it's something else just to be by yourself on the racing track and try.
There are more points on offer at the end of Grand Prix this season. The top 8 finishers now divide the spoils. The winner still gets 10 points. Second place man now scores 8. Third nets you 6 points. Fourth earns 5. Fifth 4, and so on. This regulation is particularly appealing to the smaller teams.
When you're actually looking at sponsors and you're actually going out and presenting yourself, you really need to say what you've achieved. And I think many times you can finish races 7th or 8th, and in the past it didn't mean anything, although it was a very valiant effort, whereas now you'll be rewarded, and it's a little bit more to effectively be able to sell.
4 teams have signed up to take part in the new Friday test session. Jaguar, Renault, Minardi and Jordan now get an extra 2 hours track time first thing in the morning. But unlike the other teams, they're restricted to just 20 car days testing throughout the rest of the season.
The main advantages are that we get to test the car 2 hours at the circuit prior to the actual race event. So we get to do all the tyre compares, prep the engines and so forth for the race, install the cars and just generally prepare thoroughly for the actual race event itself.
Two-way telemetry used to enable the boffins in the pits to send messages to the car out on the track using these computers. But the FIA didn't like that. They wanted the driver to remain in control. So what they did, they said that the car can send messages back to the pit, but the pit cannot send messages back to the car.
I personally think that Formula One has to be clearly seen as the pinnacle of technology in motorsport, and to dumb that down, there's many other formulas that have closer racing, touring cars for instance, but it doesn't have the worldwide appeal of Formula One. That's got to be for some other reason other than name.
Well, this is a bit of a weird sight, isn't it? A Ferrari garage with no Ferrari in it. That's because Michael Schumacher's car, along with everyone else's, is down in Parc Ferme. Now, they keep the cars there between the end of qualifying and the beginning of the race. So the car you qualify with is the car you start the race with. You can't add any fuel or change the tyres.
Really, the qualifying forms the first part of the race. And it means we have to sort out our race strategy on a Friday night now. Everything has to be decided then. And we decide the amount of fuel we want on a Friday night, and then we have to stick with it for a Saturday and a Sunday.
And finally, the FIA decided to free up the rules on tyre supply. Companies like Michelin can now tailor-make their tyres to each team's requirements. The FIA also decided that there should only be one wet tyre per weekend. And this is the new Michelin wet. It's quite a clever design. This is the front tyre. It's very heavily treaded to push out as much water as possible, leaving the road clear enough for the rear tyre that's almost like a slick to get good traction on a damp surface. We might well need it this afternoon.
You never know exactly what the weather's going to do, and here in Melbourne, of course, is a typical example. You're by the coast, you never quite know what's going to happen. But the thing is, it's the same for everyone, and any rule that is the same for everyone is not really a problem.
Well, here in our studio, I'm joined by Mark Blundell and Tony Jardine. Welcome both. Mark, lots to digest there, but I think all of us are sort of cautiously optimistic, aren't we, about the new rules?
Well, from where I sit, I think there's a lot of potential, but having spoken to a number of people down the pit lane, there's still some unrest. They still feel there should be some more changes.
Tony, as a big campaigner for change, how do you feel about them?
I think it's a good start. I mean, it is a facelift. The can opener is coming out to the cars later in the year in July in time for the British Grand Prix. But I think the Australian audience particularly like the one-shot qualifying.
Well, Pat Simmons, they're talking about the weather here in Melbourne, and there's never ever been a wet Australian Grand Prix in Melbourne. And have a look at that. That's what we got at the moment. Those poor old skydivers blown off course all over the place, and very, very tricky conditions, Mark.
Very difficult indeed, and some of the problem for the drivers is going to be the wind if it's high out there at high speeds in the fast corners, but also whether it's going to rain or whether it's going to stay dry. There's already been some tyres picked for this weekend, and the intermediate tyre for the Bridgestone runners could be a big problem.
We know the historics have been out there this morning, and then the V8s have been out there, and Mark and I were looking at the oil that was all being dropped down there as well, and of course with the rain it's bringing all the dust and dirt and debris to the surface of this track. It's going to be quite lethal actually.
OK, we shall see, of course. Well, a couple of teams, Minardi and Jordan, have wobbled a bit during the winter, but they've stayed on their feet. That's good news. We've got 10 teams on the grid for 16 races between now and mid-October, and 20% of the drivers are British.
Reigning world champions Ferrari are the bookies' favourites to win the title again in 2003. The team has retained its most successful lineup ever, Michael Schumacher and Rubens Barrichello.
The new Williams BMW has looked steady rather than lightning quick in winter testing, but give it time, they'll be on the pace. Leading the charge are Colombian bad boy Juan Pablo Montoya and proven race winner Ralf Schumacher.
No new car yet for McLaren, but the interim package has looked very promising in winter testing. David Coulthard starts his 8th season with the team. Once again, Kimi Raikkonen will be keeping him honest.
Renault are next. They've suffered with an underpowered engine in testing. Could be in for a tough development period over the next few races. Italian Jarno Trulli stays put and is joined for this year by Spaniard Fernando Alonso.
Swiss privateers Sauber are out to give the big guns a run for their money again this year. Germans Nick Heidfeld and Heinz-Harald Frentzen are the drivers charged with the task.
Jordan are now back with Ford Power, but they have to pay for it, and the Irish team need to save every penny they can at the moment. Hopes rest on the shoulders of Giancarlo Fisichella and the best driver to come out of Norfolk since Martin Brundle. It's Ralph Furman Jr.
Jaguar Cosworth are determined to up the ante in 2003. The new driver lineup looks pretty promising. Ex-Williams tester Antonio Pizzonia is joined by Aussie hotshot Mark Webber.
BAR Honda have come out with a much improved car and a very promising engine, but the drivers have fallen out with each other. We haven't even had the first race. They are the Canadian Jacques Villeneuve and his fellow facial hair enthusiast Jenson Button.
Minardi are determined to battle on against the odds. This year the Italian minnows are fielding lofty Briton Justin Wilson, and back after a year off, Jos the Boss Verstappen.
Last team in the pit lane are Toyota. They're well funded, have a decent car and are sure to score regular points. French veteran Olivier Panis and F1 rookie Cristiano De Mata are the men to deliver.
And all those drivers have already taken part in brand new qualifying system, one flying lap each on the Friday. That decides the running order for Saturday, the quickest, given the advantage of running last. We're going to review qualifying 2, the Saturday session. And first of all, decision by Minardi's not to complete the full lap. Lots of controversy about it here. What do you make of it?
I'm really unsure about it, Jim, to be perfectly honest. I don't think it was in the spirit of the rules, and at the same time, if I were Justin Wilson, I'd be really unhappy that I haven't got my name on my first qualifying sheet. And if I was an investor of Justin Wilson, I think I'd be making a little bit of a bad investment because the team are not giving him a fair shot.
Do you think the governing body will look at this and say we're going to slam the door on that probably before we go to the next Grand Prix in Malaysia, Tony?
Yeah, I was speaking to the Ferrari guys last night and they said it was against the spirit of the regulations. I thought that was a bit rich after what they did in Austria last year. But there's Jos Verstappen just aborting his qualifying run as well for tactical reasons, they said. And we fully expect this loophole to be closed because otherwise Ron Dennis could have done the same with Kimi Räikkönen and brought him in, couldn't he?
Well, you mentioned Kimi Räikkönen there, and a graphic illustration from Kimi. You make a mistake, you plummet down the grid.
Well, that's what it's all about now with the one-lap shot. You know, all the pressure's on you. Kimi was on an outstanding lap low. He did go off the road. He lost over a second and a bit, and he would have been right up there on the grid. But there's some concerns about the tyres at this point with Michelin and McLaren. They seem to have had a few failures, but talking to the guys this morning, everybody seems pretty calm.
It was strange there was a Ferrari on track, and there's a bit of a story behind that, isn't it? Because Rubens Barrichello was there, and he felt that he would have been on pole if Kimi hadn't been around.
Well, as he said, on the one-shot qualifying, you expect to be out on the track on your own, and suddenly he came across Kimi Räikkönen going around slowly, and there was debris on the track, plus there were flags, so he was distracted by that as well. And, of course, Michael Schumacher, he seemed to be glum all throughout the weekend. He ended up actually taking Rubens Barrichello's settings, which we both found a little bit strange. And then he got his act together after having been off the track 3 times, including wiping a corner off the car. So this was a very, very good lap from him. In fact, he said that it was a spot on, pushed as hard as possible, but still a contrast in driving styles, and very, very happy there in the Ferrari pit after he came back and grabbed pole, because Rubens had pole last year in the old car.
But still a couple of seconds down on last year's pole time, Tony, because of course he's carrying race fuel there.
Carrying race fuel, and of course you haven't had that much track time as well. You haven't had the qualifying time out on the track either.
Let's take a look at the Brit Pack, shall we? Jenson Button qualifying in 8th place. Very, very encouraging that for him, Mark.
Very solid performance by Jenson Button. I think already the word of war of words has gone on between Villeneuve and Button, and now they're putting everything on the circuit and getting the job done. 1-0 to Villeneuve, but Jenson's going to be very strong, I think, in the race if his Honda engine lasts. We've seen some problem with the Hondas, and they've got different engines shipped over again, but I'd like to see him finish.
Bad one for Coulthard, though.
Well, David Coulthard's morning started off very badly because he had a puncture on the left rear, and then as he was limping back, he had a problem with the fuel pump as well. And then, in the actual one-shot qualifying, he ran wide, and that dropped him all the way down to 11th place. So it wasn't a good start for McLaren, especially given how well they've been going in testing.
Ralph Furman, L plates, but not doing too badly on his first weekend.
No, Ralph Furman's been going very well. He had a tough time on Friday. He had a lot of understeer in his car. I spoke to him on Friday evening. He knew where he went wrong. He knew where he needs to go with the car, and I think he fulfilled that come Saturday for the qualifying. Very, very good performance, and he's just playing himself in. If he finishes today, it's going to be a great experience for him.
Good, absolutely delighted at this stage that we can talk live to Jenson Button down there in the pits. Hiya, Jenson. A lot of optimism up here in the studio for your chances today. Do you share that?
Yeah, well, I think if we had a dry day today, I think we had a very, very good opportunity to have a good race. You know, we've had a very good setup. We worked more on the race than on qualifying, so I'm very positive.
What particular problems does the rain give you then, Jenson?
Well, the Michelins and the Bridgestones work very different in the wet conditions. The Michelin seem to be very good when it's very wet, and the Bridgestones seem to be quite a bit better just as you're heading down to the slick conditions. So it's going to be interesting to see who comes out on top.
Tactically, can you give us any little insight into what you might be during the race? Because that is one of the big debates, of course.
Wouldn't have a clue.
I would hope, though, that you would want your race to last a little bit longer, Jenson. It did last you. Didn't get beyond the first corner, did you?
No, hopefully people will be a bit calmer this year because it's wet. But you never know. But I think we've got the car to do a good job, and I think we've got the reliability as well. After Friday's problem, you know, we've sorted out a few niggly little problems, and it's looking pretty positive.
Doesn't seem like 3 years ago, does it, Jenson, that you had your first F1 race right here?
Yeah, very different. You know, I've got a lot more experience. I'm in a much better car now, which is good to know. And you know, I'm very, very positive with the efforts everyone's put in here. So it's good.
It's good to talk to you. Just finally give us your hopes for the race itself. That long-awaited podium, of course. Do you think that's a possibility?
Yes, definitely. definitely a possibility.
We'll take that short answer from you, Jensen. Thank you very much indeed, and good luck in the Australian Grand Prix.
Thank you.
Very familiar look at the sharp end of the Foster's Australian Grand Prix, and the colour is red. Tony.
Yeah, and all Ferrari front row, and Michael Schumacher taking those settings off Rubens Barrichello. Rubens losing out, having to slow down for Kimi Räikkönen's wreckage there. Montoya, strong third place after last-minute adjustments, and Frentzen, a great comeback there in fourth place. That's the best since '99 for Sauber, and the best grid position ever for Toyota so far from Panis there, courtesy of Panis. And look at that, Villeneuve in sixth place, showing the promise of that BAR Honda. Then you've got Heidfeld alongside him, Button underlining the potential of BAR Honda. Ralf Schumacher, he made a mistake. That's his worst position for 24 races, and a big slide from Fernando Alonso dropped him down to 10th place. And running wide, Coulthard, as we saw, that dropped him down. His worst for 74 races. Jarno Trulli, mysterious understeer, dropped him down as well. Fisichella there in 13th place, then Mark Webber alongside him. The Aussie in the midfield tight pack, as he says. Then Kimi Räikkönen, 2 offs down in 15th position. Cristiano D'Amato, the first of the rookies. He had a clutch problem. Ralph Furman, the second of the rookies. Good feeling for the car, he said. And the shakiest of the rookies, Antonio Pizzonia, in 18th place. The two Minardis of Verstappen and Wilson bringing up the rear, having aborted their qualifying runs.
Congratulations, Michael. That certainly seemed to have put the smile back on your face.
Yeah, I think if you have achieved what I have achieved today, then there is a good reason to have the smile on the face, yeah.
We figured, why not do this? At least we can check the car over overnight. It looked like we were going to be at the back of the grid anyway, so we just worked the situation.
I think we've got an excellent race car for tomorrow, and it's going to be an interesting, obviously with some of the fuel strategies, it's going to be a lot of early pit stops, I think.
Today has been a nightmare for me, but it's only my fault. But this, I don't know, do we gonna start from 15 or pit lane, or where we're gonna start, because I don't know the rules so well.
Obviously not a great position to be starting. Inevitably we'll not know until we get into the race just what strategy other people are running, but I was a little bit slower there than what I did in the 15-minute warm-up, so not a particularly good effort.
Jensen, you happy with your grid position?
Ecstatic. No, I'm pretty happy. You know, it's very difficult to know where you stand on the first race weekend, and I think with the qualifying as it is now, we're pretty happy.
We know the car needs a lot of work, yes, but it's not a bad car at all. You know, I think a lot of people in the press thought we had a really crap car. That's a good term. But the car is not bad at all, and I proved it today.
So I'm second now. I'm quite happy. Ferrari's on the top, and that's what matters. But I think that could have been on pole.
We were speaking to Ross, and he was saying he's very happy with the race car and the amount of fuel you've got on board. Obviously, you're very happy with that too.
Yeah.
That's all he wanted to say. Rain staying away at the moment. Still very gloomy, though. They're all those drivers facing 58 laps of Albert Park. Reliability always the key here to success. If you manage to stay out of trouble and finish, you're very likely to score points. We have, though, as we've been saying, seen some very big accidents at this opening race in recent years. A flying lap around the park now. Martin Brundle is your guide, and we're on board with his former teammate. It's Michael Schumacher.
Shifting then around 18,800 RPM, building up to 180 miles an hour. Bring the car to the left-hand side, ready for turn one. How will it turn in? Absolutely beautifully. Straight back on the throttle. Traction control working hard in the middle of the corner, but now building once again to turn three and 175 this time. Braking around the 160-metre board. Remember, 70 kilos of fuel on board. Schumacher giving a twist to the brake balance bar with his right hand. Turn four already. Listen to five. A slight lift, also indicating a significant amount of fuel on board. Through the shadow of the trees into six. Track drops away from you briefly. Seven sweeps, easy left. Right now for eight, absolutely full throttle. Look for nine in the distance. It's a big stop, this one. Down 4 gears. Again, hook the wheel over the curbs. Now you're into a long straight. The gearbox upshifting automatically. This time, once again, 185 miles an hour, taking the shortest route. And look at this. Fantastic speed on the way in, barely downshifting, and away he goes down towards turn 13. 175 miles an hour this time. The car now really working beautifully, everything up to temperature. Nose goes in nicely, immediately back on the throttle. 14 ahead of you. 150 miles an hour down to just 90. Now, a big break, and you've got to start turning left immediately for the small hairpin. Clumsy, just 50 miles an hour. A quick short shift on the way in, and once again, the car beautifully stable on the exit. Michael Schumacher over the line for yet another pole position.
Ferrari saying there's an even better one waiting back in Italy. Michael Schumacher at the centre of the traditional pre-season team picture for all the drivers. And at the back there, in the yellow of Jordan, is the new man, Ralph Furman.
Did you feel a bit like the new boy at school out there?
Not quite. It's obviously nice to think you're in Formula One and be sitting around all these people. And then you're only one of 20 in the world to be racing Formula One.
Which you had no idea that you were going to be only about 2 months ago, didn't you?
Even less than about 6 weeks ago, really, when I finally found out. But yeah, it was just hoping and cross the fingers that it all came off, and it did. And here we are on a wet, rainy Melbourne day.
Wet and rainy, like you say. Does that make you a bit worried, or do you like that fact?
I've always gone well in the rain, but I think none of us have raced around here in the rain before, so it's going to be certainly an interesting race. And not being able to change the cars for setup at all, it's going to make it even more interesting to drive a Formula One car.
It's going to have been a whole weekend of firsts for you, hasn't it? Is there anything that's not been how you thought it would be?
I mean, it's all been an amazing experience, and I've learnt a great deal, and hopefully should carry it forward. But it's Formula One, and you've got to. Lots of things have been great and more unexpected than I realised they would be.
Well, you got your first experience of the drivers' parade now, which unfortunately you're going to have to do in the wet, but enjoy yourself out there. You should get a good response from the crowd.
Thanks very much. Looking forward to going round. So.
He might well be going round in the wet as well. And just to underline what happens this opening Grand Prix of the season, there is a very high rate of attrition. Just 8 finishes last year, 9 in 2008, back in 99, 9 in 98 as well. Things do tend to happen at the Australian Grand Prix. You know, ever since the first ITV Grand Prix here, it was 100 races, and 6 years ago, this one has been my favourite race. Today's pole sitter, Michael Schumacher, chasing that unprecedented 4th successive victory. Now, last year, younger brother Ralph was accused of causing first corner chaos in the opening 30 seconds.
The tension mounts at Albert Park. Can Rubens Barrichello win from pole position? He hasn't won a race since Germany 2000. Will this be his day? 2 lights, 3 lights. You know what's coming, don't you? Ready? You ready? Let's go! Fantastic start by one of the Benzos. Ralph Schumacher challenges Barrichello. Michael Schumacher's got a poor start, but Ralph is motoring into second place, and he hits Rubens Barrichello. Huge accident. Oh my goodness. Rubens' rear wing's off. There goes Ralph Schumacher.
Total carnage. It started with Ralph hitting the back of Barrichello, flying into the air, and then everybody shunting behind in sympathy.
9 cars out there, something like £10 million worth of damage. Are you expecting anything similar this time round?
Well, the Australian Grand Prix is no stranger to controversy. There have been a lot of incidents at this race, and because it's the first race, everyone wants to get off to a good start. I mean, there's been some huge accidents. Villeneuve had a very unfortunate accident a few years ago. And controversy, team orders in '98 with McLaren.
Go on then, Mark, what do you reckon?
Oh, we're missing one thing out. There's been no warm-up. The drivers are going into that race completely cold. They're going to do a little bit of a parade lap there, then off into the first corner. So, yeah, could be fireworks.
I know Martin Brundle has said he's worried because the drivers just haven't had enough time on the circuit over the weekend.
If you analyse a lot of the drivers and look at the amount of laps, they've done very, very few miles indeed. And that can be a little bit of a dangerous thing. There's going to be a little bit of red mist coming down in turn 1. Could be some good action.
National hero Mark Webber has got a new team, Jaguar, and that means greater expectations from the Australian public who expect their sporting stars to be winners. But that very special day right here a year ago felt like winning the World Championship itself. Beverly Turner reporting.
This time last year, Mark Webber exceeded all expectations in his F1 debut with a 5th place finish in front of a home crowd.
Look. If you had one shot, one opportunity to seize everything you ever wanted, one moment, did you capture? Just let it slip. Yo.
Advance Australia, fair, you've done it, boy. Fair Deacon.
It blew me away, absolutely blew me away. It took ages to sink in. It was just meant to happen.
Now, of course, Mark Webber is a hero to kids all across Australia. But I have a feeling that some of his most loyal fans can be found in here.
your hands together, give him a big, big cheer.
Mark was born in Queanbeyan and was a pupil at this school from kindergarten to year 6. Some of his teachers are still here today.
Very, very cheeky young man. Always kept me on my toes.
Although the cheeky young man can now bring smiles to the faces of children all across Australia, his own journey to the top wasn't always an easy one.
It's not like golf or tennis or rowing when you can just pick up the equipment that you need and get on with it. It is an expensive sport, and it always has been like that. And I think there's a lot of battlers who have still managed to make it in Formula One.
Fortunately, however, Mark has incredibly supportive parents. They're also pretty good at keeping his feet on the ground.
Do you remember that, son? You still can't use it properly. It's too fast for him.
It's not cheap being in motorsport, is it? So it must have been hard over the years.
It has been difficult, yeah. A lot of money. We're comfortable here in Australia, that's true. But when we get to England, with the value of our dollar, well, it made it very expensive.
But while Dad was worried about money matters, Mum was just concerned for her little boy, and she still is.
I don't enjoy watching him, I've got to be honest.
Do you watch on television?
Yeah. When I know the result.
Yeah. And although weekends were spent on Grandad's farm, Mark lived his first 18 years here and has very fond memories.
Very special house for me, you know. I spent all my life there, my whole life before I went to the UK. Yeah, kissed my first girl there, you know. Lots of little things like that which you never forget, you know.
Back on the 2,000-acre farm for a rare home visit, the serious business of the new season seems a long way off.
I should warn you before you... Snakes are pretty happy around the shed here, so...
Are you serious?
Very serious.
Okay, I'm going after you.
Yeah, but it is cold, so they won't be.
There's no snakes in here.
No. Grab it. It's beautiful.
The farm offers the perfect escape from F1, but soon it'll be back to reality, the opening race and the season ahead.
I want to be a very respected driver in the midfield. I think that's where we're going to be. You know, it's silly to say. You know, I mean, Ferrari, McLaren, they're in a different category. We know that, and Williams. But there's a tremendous battle, I think, potentially brewing in the midfield.
But Mum is much less concerned about results.
Just hope he does well, but the main thing is too that he's safe. That's all I ask.
Mum watching Mark Webber starting 14th on the grid. Mind you, he was 18th last year and he still scored those precious 2 points for Minardi. Webber and all the other drivers having to wear the HANS device this season. HANS meaning head and neck safety. Some of those drivers hate it. David Coulthard's taken time out to give us a real insight. Mind you, David having his hands full with that big brolly at the Drivers' Parade. And that comes next in our countdown to the Australian Grand Prix. Back with the ITV F1 team in Melbourne. Jarno Trulli, plenty of ground to make up in the Renault. We are counting down to the start of the Australian Grand Prix. You've heard a lot about those new regulations in F1 2003, and they include a compulsory new safety device for Jarno Trulli, Schumacher and all the drivers. Let's get the lowdown from David Coulthard.
Well, yes, Jim, David's worked very hard on adapting his HANS system. David, what have you done to make it more comfortable for you?
Well, given that presumably the public know pretty much how the standard HANS works, where it's fastened to the helmet, and then obviously the driver positions this over the back of his neck. What I've come up with the belt designer Schroth is a double belt system. So you have the standard seat belt, which is this one here below, which goes on the shoulder. And then the HANS device is actually positioned in between that and an additional strap which is pulled tight over it. So the benefit of this over the system that everyone else is using is that I don't actually have this pushing down on my collarbone, because it pushes down on top of the additional belt which pulls the body down into the car. So I think that this system is something that the other drivers are going to adopt, and they just didn't have the chance to test prior to coming to this race.
Now, of course, you've got 58 laps of hard racing with this thing on. How do you think you're going to feel towards the end of a race distance?
Well, I think with the double belt system, it takes away any discomfort.
So then, it's an interesting device. I know quite a few of the drivers feel really uncomfortable wearing it. You have had to wear one of those, and how did you get on with it?
I tried it and I didn't like it, but you know the problem is all the drivers are different shapes and sizes. I think DC's device there is very good. Typical Formula 1 innovation already with that device, and a lot of people down the pit lane will take it.
He set a bit of a trend there, hasn't he? Do you think the rest will follow?
Well, they've all got different ways of doing it. As Mark said, they're all different shapes. Like Villeneuve has hardly any neck at all. Heidfeld suffers particularly. He's got these huge notches on the top of his collarbone now. Barrichello had to pull out of a test in Imola because of it. And Villeneuve is vehemently opposed to it. He said if Deniz had been wearing the Hans device when he went upside down in '99 in Germany, he'd have been killed.
Well, they've got to get on with it. They've got to wear it.
Got to. Max said they won't go out of the pit lane without them on.
Absolutely. Emails coming in on the ITV F1 website. We picked out a couple that have caught our eye. Baz Gleeson from Nottingham asking, if Minardi haven't qualified within the required 107% rule, why are they being allowed to take part in the race at all, Tony?
Well, in fact, they did qualify inside the 107% rule because they took part in the first qualifying session, and therefore they're legally allowed to start from the back of the grid.
Another email has come in, I think about the first corner pilot. Yeah, Richard Cook asking, if there is a first corner pilot like last year, if the race is red flagged, will the drivers involved, Mark, be able to get into their spare car?
If the race is red flagged in the first 2 laps, and the race car cannot be repaired, the FIA technical steward says that that's the case, then okay, they can give the scrutineer a ticket to the team and they can take the spare car. So yes, providing the race is not done after a couple of laps, they can go on.
Keep those emails coming in, and of course we'll try and respond to a couple after the race as well. A year ago, Alan McNish was preparing for his F1 debut. He is now a test driver at Renault. He's given us some great contributions this weekend, and he's down there with Lou.
We're down in the pit lane at the moment, Jim. Tension starting to build down here as the cars make their way out onto the grid. What are your predictions, Alan? 2 Ferraris on the front row. Is everyone just going to be chasing them?
I think the Ferraris are definitely in the best position right now. Circuit conditions are obviously fluctuating, but now with the way the weather is, it's thrown all the strategies from yesterday out of the window. And I think we're really going to have to follow what the weather does more than follow what the Ferraris do.
Will that help somebody like David? He's starting from 11th on the grid. If it rains, is that going to be of assistance to him?
Well, I think the first thing is get through the first couple of corners because I'm sure someone's going to try and make up a few positions. It's the first race. People haven't qualified where they hope to be, and there will be mistakes. And then after that, I would say the likes of David and the McLaren philosophy is probably going to see through the day.
Are you finding this a bit frustrating, being stood here in the pit lane when you'd rather be out in a car on the grid?
Yeah, I've got to say now it is a little bit frustrating. I'm sure in 20 minutes when they're actually going off it is. But if they're slipping and sliding around in the carnage at the first corner in shoes, then I might be quite happy I'm not in that particular part.
Cheers, Alan.
Thank you.
That's Rubens Barrichello, and I think he might have just had 1 or 2 problems. It's hard to tell from here, of course, Tony and Mark, but the philosophy of going out there means that you're using your race fuel, surely.
Exactly. At this point in time, you know, they finish with their qualifying run, and the fuel amount that they go then is carried into the race. Every time he runs through that pit lane, if there is an issue with the car, he's using up valuable fuel, and that's going to cut down in his first stop.
Well, this is part of why McLaren and Williams have gone to arbitration over the new rules, the sweeping changes that they say, because this is the part which they say is dangerous. It's a timing issue. The timing issue of preparation of the cars, the 2.5 hours, what constitutes a danger in terms of the tyres and so on. And that's why they're going to arbitration over this. You could see both sides of it, obviously. From the FIA's point of view, they're putting a facelift on Formula 1 to make it more refreshing, to actually snub out the use of special qualifying cars and reduce the expenditure in Formula 1, which has to happen in the current economic climate.
The Royal Australian Air Force, you might have heard them. They always buzz over and let us know they are here at the Australian Grand Prix. We're going to hear now from an Australian sportsman who's given us fantastic pleasure over the years, particularly during Wimbledon fortnight. He's with Beverly Turner.
Now, the Melbourne Grand Prix attracts all sorts of Australian sporting legends, and let's face it, they have a few, one of which is here, Mr. Pat Rafter. You looking forward to today?
Yeah, it should be good fun. It's a great thing for Australia, and the Australians get right behind it, especially down here in Melbourne. They really go hard, and as you're about to find out, it's very noisy.
Any predictions for the race?
Pretty hard to go by Ferrari, I suppose. I'm sitting on the fence. It's like probably saying the Williams sisters are going to win the Grand Slam, so Oh, obviously, you know, it's always good to see something competitive and someone come up to challenge them, and I'm sure there'll be a few contenders today.
Give us an idea of the atmosphere here today. Describe that for the viewers back home.
Oh, it's just so many people. I think everyone, you go around a corner, just people yelling out, screaming. It's just, I don't know, the noise, you hear it on television, but it's just, you can't hear anything. I mean, you ask me something when the Formula One car comes by, you can't hear anything for the next couple seconds. It's just a great buzz, and I think with the cars being that loud, it's just, that just electrifies everyone that's out here watching.
Michael Klim, 5 times Olympic medalist swimmer. How are you enjoying today?
Oh, very much. This is so different to what I'm used to, obviously, and it's a different scene, and yeah, I'm loving it, just trying to soak it in.
How do you think Formula One does compare to something like swimming?
Well, I'd like to think that it compares in the sense that we try and consider ourselves some high-performance machines as well, but it's certainly not, you know, it's a different world altogether, and I'm just trying to sort of learn some of the professionalism of the drivers, and obviously Michael Schumacher is just the, you know, he's just the leader in that, and you know, I really enjoy just, you know, looking the way they sort of handle themselves around the track, and it's just a credit to them, and they've got a lot more pressure than what we do. So no, it's very enjoyable, and I guess it's, you know, the racing's one thing, but the atmosphere and the scene is another thing. So.
And the Royal Australian Air Force, that was a fella making all the noise. And I tell you what, here they put on a fantastic aerial display, and it's a terrific climax to 4 brilliant motoring days in Melbourne. We've got high hopes for a young driver this season who I'm sure is going to go very well indeed. He's a Spaniard. He's called Fernando Alonso, and he's with Louise.
Fernando, you've been watching from the sidelines for the last year. Is it nice to be back?
Yes, after 18 months, you know, that I race with Minardi is a very exciting weekend for me.
Interesting weather conditions today. What complexion does that put on the race for you?
Yes, a big difference, you know, compared with a normal race. It's very stressing now in the garage because we don't know what the weather is doing, but we hope everything is good for us.
Thanks for talking to us.
Go on, Fernando, you got to work. Someone tapping him on the shoulder there. There's Montoya. We haven't spoken too much about Williams, Tony, and Montoya saying our car isn't, well, I won't say exactly what it's being called, but isn't as bad as people have suggested.
He's always direct and to the point, isn't he, Juan Pablo Montoya? I think because testing went so badly for them, and there's been a big question mark over their aerodynamics, and the whole package wasn't integrated as such, that they've been taking a lot of stick in the press. And of course Juan Pablo said, well, that's not the case. They actually did very well to take 3rd place. We don't know, like the rest of the teams don't know, how much fuel they've got on board, but they've done a good job in qualifying.
You're saying there might be a bit of collusion between 1 or 2 of the bigger teams, like Ferrari and the small teams. Just tell us that theory.
Well, that suggestion was really made by David Coulthard. What he's saying is that a bigger team could collude with a smaller team in terms of, let's just say it would be sort of the hare and the rabbit syndrome. He was referring to a possibility of a Sauber running towards the front on a light fuel load and then getting in the way of the faster cars coming through and working in tandem with someone like Ferrari. He didn't directly say it, but Michael Schumacher said that's rubbish. Sauber would have their own interests at heart.
Well, we got a very good shot there of Albert Park, and you can see it's very, very overcast at the moment. The rain's staying away, though. Michael Schumacher, the odds-on favourite, with a terrific record here in Australia. And as the jet flies away, we will quieten down and we'll go grid walking.
Hello, Jim. Welcome, everybody. Nice to be with you again. Welcome to Nightmare on Pit Straight. I tell you, this is the worst-case scenario for all of the teams and drivers on the grid today. Because look at the racetrack. It's not wet, but it's not dry. They've had no wet practice here at all. I'm sure they're all going to start on a wet-style tyre. Bridgestone have an intermediate tyre. It's going to work beautifully this afternoon. The track is full of debris from the support races, Porsches, Holden V8s, all crashing all over the place, glass, rubbish. I saw Michael Schumacher having to swerve around a load of mud on his outlap. Surprisingly, both Ferraris doing 2 laps to the grid, therefore wasting a crucial lap of fuel. Remember, they cannot refuel at any stage before the race. What they could have done, if anybody had chosen to do so, is go in the pits, wait there, and as soon as this lot leave for the formation lap, then they could fuel, put a full wet setting on if they wanted, lower the car, change the suspension settings, whatever they wanted to do, but start the race from the pit lane. That may have been a smart move to do that. But look, let's have a quick word with Paul Stoddart and Justin Wilson. Stoddy, you're looking quite smart on yesterday's decision now, because you've been able to set both your cars up for the afternoon with all the knowledge of the weather forecast and everything.
Really helped, Martin. The problem is, unfortunately, Jos has had a problem. He's going to be starting from the pit lane in the T car. But yeah, from a strategy point of view, it was the way to go. We've had a lot of rain here this morning. It has dried up a bit now, but I'm told reliably, I hope, from a helicopter that there's some more coming in.
Okay, good. Justin, have you driven this car in the wet?
No, apart from those 2 laps I've just done. So it's, again, new experience. It's very slippy around here. There's a lot of mud on the track, so just going to try and keep it on the tarmac.
So what's going through? I mean, I have to say, this is worst case scenario for your first ever Grand Prix with no wet practice or anything. What's going through your mind?
Just to enjoy it. You know, there's not much else you can do. This is what I've always wanted to do. I'm just going to make the most of this, and you know, we'll see what happens. We might be lucky. We might get through the first corner and stand a chance.
Yeah, you've got to get through the first corner to finish first. First, you must finish. And I can see you doing a few giant killing acts today on those Bridgestone intermediates.
They seem very good so far. So my previous experience when I drove the yellow car a couple of years ago on these intermediates, they were just fantastic. So I know they're good, and hopefully we can move forwards. But one step at a time, just get used to it in these conditions.
Okay, well, I'm well impressed how calm everything is down here. Good luck this afternoon. Let's wander along and see if we can find the other new Brit on the grid, Ralph Furman, who I briefly saw him wandering off the track a while ago, looking quite intense, I have to say. And again, here's a man. Ralph, good to talk to you. Very difficult first Grand Prix for you with these conditions. It's so changeable, isn't it? What did it feel like on the way round?
Some parts are slippery and some parts are obviously a bit more standing water, but there's a lot of oil on the exit of turn 2. But yeah, it's going to be an unbelievable experience starting my first Grand Prix, and a difficult one as well. So.
Have you had much chance in the Jordan in the wet?
We tested in Barcelona in the rain, and things were good, but speaking to some of the other drivers, they say here's a very different grip level to Barcelona, so just have to be very cautious, I think.
Watching some of the guys do their formation lap, there's quite a lot of spray in some parts of the race, surprising amount of spray, in fact.
Yeah, there's still a lot of standing water in some places, but other places it's almost dry, so it's quite surprised to see some of the cars just roll past with groove tyres on. But
do you think that do you think cars will start this race on slicks then, on the dry tyres?
Someone might take a gamble, but we're not going to. We're going to start on the intermediates.
Okay, good luck. Let's have a quick wander down and see if we can catch up with David Coulthard. Are you with me? I have to say, I think this is one of the most difficult situations. Remember, they cannot reset their cars. They've got to start the race with whatever they went into qualifying with, and that is one of the problems with the new rules for the teams. Is they're so nailed into position in terms of, I'm sure they'd want to run some more wing. We've heard from the two new boys just how slippery it is, and ideally they'll want to put some wing on this car. They'll want to soften the suspension. If they think it's going to rain harder later on, they may even want to raise the ride height of the car, because these cars with the plank underneath, they can go along like a powerboat. They can get on top of the water and actually steer the car from the under tray. So a lot of things they would like to do to these cars if it's going to rain hard. I wanted to have a quick word with Sir Jackie Stewart here. Jackie, how are you looking at Jaguar?
Well, it depends on the weather conditions. If it were to rain for us, Martin, it would be better. Bad conditions would suit both of those young drivers, I think, more than a dry track. Still a little bit to do for themselves as well as the car.
Okay, do you feel that Bridgestone with the intermediate, let's say it rains very heavily, what do you think they will do with the safety car? Because you could say that Bridgestone have chosen the wrong tyre if it rains heavily, and it'll be then the Michelin runners will be penalised. Well, such as yourself.
Right now, I don't know, because I haven't been, I'm not hands-on any longer. I'm involved with the team, I'm on the board, but I'm not actually on the day-to-day running of the team or the decision. Right now, it looks to me there's a strong wind and this is going to dry out. I think before any time at all, we're going to be in dry tyres. The trouble is with the strategy of the fuel stop factor, that's going to be very complicated.
It is indeed. I'm expecting cars to stop between lap 10 and lap 20 in normal circumstances.
Well, I think that's very realistic. And I think most of the rain's gone for the day now. If we look at the flags and see how strong they're flying, I think we're going to have a dry track.
Thank you, Jackie, and back to you in the studio.
Well, just looking down along the grid there, Mark, I mean, there's such a sense of anticipation and nobody really knows what's occurring. It's really exciting, really unusual.
Well, that's the thing. Nobody knows what's going to happen into that first turn. But as you can see, there's some of the new guys there, a little bit anxious, very nervous. I can remember my first Grand Prix. It's an incredible scenario. You just, all your career, you built up to it, and now they're about to take the first turn.
This is what we hope for, Tony, all sorts of unpredictability.
Yeah, and it's also, as you say, it is a very, very difficult, tough track. We must remember it is a street circuit, and you've got those concrete walls right at the edges, so one little mistake and you're off.
Mark Webber carrying Australian hopes. Is it going to rain? Paul Stoddart says there is more rain on the way. Jackie Stewart expecting it to dry out. We're all set for the first race of the new season. The normal suspects are Michael Schumacher, Barrichello, Ferrari at the front. But historically, cars do break here. Remember, last year, that first corner accident, 9 went out. Good luck to Mark Webber. Good luck as well to the British drivers, Ralph Furman and Justin Wilson, minutes away from their F1 debuts. Jenson Button, he's got a great scoring chance as he wears BAR colours for the very first time. The Australian Grand Prix is next.
The race on ITV, sponsored by Toyota.